The Marlins are 1-1-1 in spring. Yes, sir. We've had 3 games in spring. Early reactions to all the action on the field. Yes, sir. Locked On Marlins is talking about baseball on the field. Who has impacted? Who's made a good start? Who's made a sluggish start? Equally, some breaking news that is very close to the UK GOATs heart and Sean Barrett. Garrett Cooper signs a minor league deal with the Chicago Cubs. Tons to get into, guys. This is Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins, your daily Marlins pod. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up at Miami Marlins _UK. If you're listening to the pod, firstly, hello and welcome. Second of all, hit subscribe, leave a review. This is your team every day. And thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. There is a YouTube channel as well, guys. Make sure you hit subscribe there also. The YouTube channel, just in case you are wondering, is named Locked On Marlins. Make sure you hit subscribe there too. Make sure you join us in the comments too. It's wild and highly recommended. This episode is sponsored by our good friends over at FanDuel. You can make every moment more. New customers join today and you get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And yes, it is Tuesday, but the UK GOAT, after a day of mourning, is here. Sean Barrett, how are we doing?
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd day for me. I've got some good news and bad news. We've got some games going on. We've actually made it through the winter. There are now games on our screens. We didn't have to do a trade series either, which is probably a few people out there that are thankful for that. That got pretty dry pretty quickly, didn't it? Yeah, as you said, Coop signed a minor league non-roster invitee with the Cubs, which, yeah, I think that just speaks to the situation with the free agency this year. Obviously, the Marlins benefited by getting Tim Anderson for $5 million. Coop, yeah, I mean, I would have loved to have seen a reunion. But yeah, that's the state of free agency at the moment, isn't it? Yeah,
really interesting topic. We're going to cover that shortly, I would say. Probably segment 2, we will talk about Cooper in more depth, free agency more generally, and we'll kind of blend it in with like what the Marlins options are actually at first base, because like that kind of blends into some of the spring reactions too. So we're going to talk about Coop. He is a Cub at this point. We'll see how things play out for Coop. We'll dig into that in more detail. But let's start with the action on the field for the Marlins that are still here and remain here and are on the roster, and some of them fighting for jobs as well, and some of them fighting not to lose their jobs. So there's tons happening. We've had 3 games. So we sit at 1-1-1 at this point. We're recording this just effectively after the game 3 of spring has ended, but in advance of game 4. So we've got tons to get into. There's some early reactions. I put out a tweet as well the other day with like, you know, who's hot, who's not, maybe is the best way of phrasing it. But Sean, from your perspective, 3 games in spring, do you have a big takeaway or 2 thus far?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's the first 3 games of spring. There's not really much to take from it. The main point for me is to look at the pitchers. The rotation is a strength of this team. It continues to be the strength of this team without Sandy there. So looking at Luzardo yesterday, or the day before, which day are we saying it is today?
It's Tuesday today, but
yeah, game 2 when Luzardo pitched, you know, it's exactly what you want to see. You want to see some velo. You want to see some control. You want to see some stuff. You want to see those strikeouts. But yeah, the main thing for me for spring is always health. We've seen Luzardo. We saw Uri today. Both of them pitched well. There are some good things to take from that. And with the news that we got with Garrett today, that he's going to take some bullpens. He's probably now going to miss his first, second, third way through the rotation to begin the season at this point, I would imagine. he's definitely going to miss the first time anyway. So to see health from the starting pitchers, especially that top end that we've got with and Luzardo is the key for spring for me. So that was definitely exciting to see. And they both looked really good. Stuff was there, the velo was there, and that's really all after three games is kind of what I'm interested in.
Yeah. What do you make of Ryan Weathers? Obviously got the ball in game one. That was like the full television, the full production. So it was a little bit easier to watch Ryan Weathers. For me, I've spoke about it, and we've probably spoke about it. Like, he's kind of on a roster bubble at this point. Like, I'm not quite sure of his role, whether he's fighting for a rotation spot. But, what did you take away from the Weathers start?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't quite as controlled as the other two. Gave up a couple of hits, walks and runs. It's the first game of spring, so I'm not going to look at it too negatively. But that first game, you look at the guys, you've got Weathers and Hoeing, and then Simpson, and then we get into the names of people like, am I certain I know who these people are? I think it is a case of that first game was just to get some guys going. Yeah. So for me, yes, the Marlins are going to need that depth of that 5th, 6th, 7th starter going into the season, and obviously next man up. And that's where Weathers and Hoeing are kind of, for me, one of them might latch on as a long man, but if the Marlins are reliant on either of those two as their 5th starter for any length of time, then that would be a concern for me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Hoeing kind of slid into that role, like he slid into a few different roles last year, but I think if Hoeing's in the rotation for a sustained period, that's probably not an optimal sign. We'll see. Let's flip it over to the offense, though, mate, because, game one, man, oh, man, the offense, both offenses actually in that game were alive, which was interesting. But from a Marlins perspective, the standout clearly, Brian De La Cruz, 2 hits. He only had 2 plate appearances, so 2 for 2, both doubles. The bases were juiced in one of them, so he hits a double to clear the bases and score 3. He'd already had a run scoring double prior to that. So 4 RBIs for De La Cruz. The interesting part too, for me, Sean, the biggest takeaway out of all of this is the fact that those 2 balls were both scorched by Brian De La Cruz standards. They were like up there in the top 5 hardest hit balls, I think, of his career, to be honest with you. So I know it's not about the stats at this point in spring, but when you start to look at doubles and the exit velo, you start to get a little bit excited thinking, what's changed here for De La Cruz? Or all of a sudden in a single game, in 2 at-bats in spring, he's hit 2 of his hardest ever balls that he's ever hit. So for me, I think that's a really interesting takeaway there from Brian De La Cruz. We've then seen, just on the flip side of De La Cruz, just to round it off here, we've seen there was some erratic glove work, I think, in that game as well, where he almost overrun one and then caught it. And then today, dealt with the sun. I don't know if it ended up being charging error, but, it reminds us that De La Cruz in left field is definitely a bit of an adventure at times. With Soler gone, I do wonder about De La Cruz's role and whether we do see him more out of the outfield and into a DH spot. But from what we're seeing with the bat, there could be some step forward here, which would be really encouraging, I think. What about you?
Yeah, funnily enough, Gabby Sanchez on the broadcast did mention afterwards that it had been scored a double, but really should have, under his breath, really should have been an error. So, De La Cruz at the moment looking like a DH in every sense of the word.
Yeah, he is.
Is a poor defensive corner outfield. And you're right about the hitting. It is a case of the stats don't really matter in spring. We've seen guys have scorching springs and then do nothing at the major league level. Mentioning no names for you there, Peter. But the exit velocity, barreling up a ball or 2 in a game, that's what you really want to see. If a guy barrels a ball, line drive, caught by the shortstop, that's a poor end, but a good input. Yep. That's what you want to be seeing.
Definitely.
A guy could go 600 hitting bloops and having this, that, and the other go the right way for him, and that's a bad spring. So
we might talk about someone like that later on in the show. I don't know.
Ultimately, De La Cruz at the moment, and again, 3 games, a couple of bats. That's all we have to talk about at the moment. But ultimately, they are good signs. With the bat at least.
Yeah, I was ultra encouraged, to be honest with you, about what I saw there with those. Just the exit velo, the outcome clearly as well, which is great. Let's not forget, just how amazing De La Cruz finished the 2022 season. We were all like, a lot of people across Major League Baseball were like hyping it up. Like, are we going to see this step forward? Can September De La Cruz continue? It's fair to say we didn't quite see that as a sustained, piecing it together in 23. De La Cruz was still productive to a point. But I feel like there's more juice in the tank, to be honest with you, with De La Cruz. He's already talked about saying in the offseason he's trying to work on his corner outfield defense and he's trying to work on his base running because both of them have been below par for some time. And to your point, Sean, I think you've coined it well. Like, he's pretty much looking like a DH at this point, De La Cruz. Like, that's kind of what we're maybe expecting here. But it's good to hear that he's still working on things. Whether he can make it in left field, I don't know. And, the signing of Nick Gordon, and for the Marlins this is the thing that really struck me straight away with Nick Gordon. The trade happened, and they seemed to position him straight away as an outfielder that has played infield. And that, to me, was a really telling sign that I think they like Nick Gordon out in left field, and I can see Brian De La Cruz spending more time not in the outfield, more time DHing. We'll see. Let's get into the first ad. I want to cover a few more offensive guys, actually. There's a few standouts and equally some guys that have had a really sluggish start here as well. Before we do that, though, this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at eBay Motors. And I love this one, guys. And guys, passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that dub. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, guys, you're back here with me, Peter Pratt, and the UK GOAT, Sean Barrett. We are giving our early spring reactions. De La Cruz exit velo way up on a couple of hard-hit balls. Defense looking shaky. Is he going to be the primary DH for the Marlins if they don't add to this roster? That's a question. Remains unanswered. Sean, another couple of standouts here for me. Let's talk about Tristan Gray. Pressure was on him. I say pressure's on. Pressure is on. He's fighting for a job. The Marlins have signed Tim Anderson, which, that kind of impacts him, particularly at the start of the year. But for Tristan Gray, his profile is decent shortstop, power production. We see that power immediately. For me, I was really intrigued by this one. And this was like demolished as well, this home run. So Tristan Gray getting off the mark. Again, it's only in spring, but, it can only help, right? You put a home run on tape straight away. First at bat, first pitch, I think it was, as a Marlin. And it's absolutely demolished. This is the kind of power profile that Marlins have not seen at all, that shortstop position. Forever. For as ever as I've been a fan, there's been no power production from this position. So for me, this is always going to be a guy that I'm interested in. And from your perspective, what can this mean for Tristan Gray in the kind of grand scheme of things as we kind of go through spring and towards opening day?
Yeah, you're right with the power. It was no cheapie, was it? It wasn't a Wolf Gray, but he absolutely
hit it's not. Yeah,
the level off that ball. And you're right, Marlins shortstops with power. You're looking at probably Hanley Ramirez.
Yeah,
the last guy that did it in a Marlins jersey. And yeah, Gray's got that 30 home run power in his bat. And yeah, it was great to see. The one concern I do have is I think it was yesterday, watched an at-bat with him where it kind of looked like he was selling out for it a bit, like he was trying. And then his spring, why not? Get your springs in. But, with that power comes swing and miss stuff, a lack of walks. But yeah, you put 30 home runs in a shortstop glove into the lineup with at least, a 240 average or whatever that plays. But it's when you sell out for that power and you end up hitting below the Mendoza line. That's kind of what the Marlins have had quite a few bats like in the last couple of years. These guys have got the power, they've got the profile, but they haven't got that ability to hit for average. Griffin Conine comes to mind, and Peyton Burdick, a few others, and obviously that's cost them major league time. So hopefully Gray can balance that power with an approach that keeps him at the major league level. And you're right, he is competing for a major league job at this point with Anderson in the lineup. So he's definitely got to show something.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, there's opportunities elsewhere. Like, there isn't an obvious DH candidate at this point. We spoke about De La Cruz, but there's spots available here where, like, a power hitting dude, what's to say Tristan Gray ends up, as a DH? Why not? Maybe, you want Tim Anderson if you prefer him at shortstop, and you want, Jake Berger at third. Maybe. It could be that, like, Tristan Gray, could he play third? Probably he could. So, there's a job to be won here for Tristan Gray if he puts it on tape. Another guy that kind of stood out to me in game one in particular, Victor Mesa Jr., obviously a big, he's on the 40-man now, so his opportunity is getting closer. Spoke to him on this show. He knows it's in touching distance at this point. Rolls in. Couple of doubles as well for Victor Mesa Jr., which was great to see as well. And one of them in particular, I thought was a home run off the bat. I know it's quite a big outfield out there, and I don't think the wind was helping him. But again, really encouraging signs. Like, a guy added to the 40-man, pressure's on. He knows effectively, like, he's pretty. Most likely, we see Victor Mesa Jr. with the Marlins at some point in 24. Like, that's the most likely situation. So for me, really encouraging, Sean, that, couple of doubles to get it rolling. I think it was a couple of doubles, at least single and a double maybe. But even so, like, encouraging signs. And, this could be a really interesting year for Victor Mesa Jr., right?
Yeah, it was two doubles to begin with. It is a case of, I think the main point that you made there is that he's on the 40-man roster. Yeah. We've seen a few guys leave the organization, Groshans and a few others leave because of that 40-man crunch, and Victor Mesa Jr. is still there. So this is his opportunity, and you're right, it might not necessarily be to begin the year, but certainly he will see time at the major league level. The power is obviously, well, not the power, but doubles of the contact. That's what you want to be seeing from him. But it's going to be a case of, is he going to show enough to get a job to finish spring? Probably not. But anything that the Marlins can see, anything that he can show against major league guys will be key. A positive start for him is always good. Like, when you get a couple of hits in that first game and you're riding that high, hopefully he can just carry that on through the spring and really show what he can do.
Yeah, for sure. It's really encouraging. Really encouraging. And, Dane Myers is in that same kind of mix too. But, on the 40-man, no obvious kind of playing time at this point. Like I mentioned, like, I get the sense that Nick Gordon's going to have a real good chance in the outfield if he's healthy. Jazz obviously is at center field, and we know that. Jesus Sanchez, we'll see. Again, we've got the situation with Avisail Garcia where, like, it feels like he's blocking people defensively. Feels like he's blocking people offensively. And Avisail Garcia, I mean, sure, you were tweeting about it yesterday. I wasn't actually watching live, but, your tweet suggested to me that the at-bats and the results were not encouraging from Avisail Garcia. In some ways, this is a big spring for Avi. In many ways, it isn't, because he's got guaranteed money. But if he wants to be a Marlin and make this roster, like, he has to perform in spring, because if he doesn't, he's going to be gone. And who knows what the future holds for him there. So what did you see from Avi's first couple of at-bats?
Yeah, they didn't look pretty, that's for certain. There was a free pitch, free strikeout.
Oh, boy.
To begin with, and he looked slow, he looked lost. As far as a blockage goes, it does seem like the Marlins need to get the plunger out and really give that blockage a go over and get rid of it, because at the moment I'm not seeing much progress.
This is the frustrating thing with Avi. Like, if there's no progress, then it's just time to pull the plug and, like you said, get the plunger out. Because for all the good that Peter Bendix is doing and the way they're building this roster, to have a full passenger, both defensively, blocking what you want to do, offensively, we know the money's the money. It is what it is. But, it's getting to a point, we're in Chen territory. We've been in Chen territory for some time. And I feel like if Avi compounds that with a poor spring, then it leaves the Marlins with no option but to cut ties with that one and just kind of, call it a bust. The lucky thing is, and the way it makes it easier just on that point, is it wasn't a Peter Bendick signing. And so if it has to be done, it has to be done. Bruce Sherman won't enjoy that situation, but, at least Peter Bendick can hold his hands up and say, wasn't me. And that worked for Shaggy. So there you go. Right, guys, final ad. And then we're going to talk about some Garrett Cooper, equally the first base situation. Trey Mancini, first look at him. Troy Johnston, stepping up. So really interesting, I guess, battle of first base. Before we do that, though, this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Yes, sir. And you can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, that's where I live, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, guys, back here for the final segment with me, Peter Pratt, and the UK GOAT, Sean Barrett. We are transitioning over to first base. We're firstly going to start with, a sore subject, I think, for Sean Barrett. Well, not so, kind of mixed, a mixed reaction. But Garrett Cooper, Marlin All-Star in 2022, traded away to the Padres last season. But Coop finally gets a deal done. Not quite what we were expecting headed into the offseason, but Coop is a Cub. Minor league deal, NRI, headed to camp. The sense from Craig Mish is that he's going to make this Cubs roster. So I guess that will be, I haven't seen the details of it, but let's assume it's going to be, league minimum. Maybe there's a little bit extra in there. I don't know. But Sean, your reaction to firstly Coop as a Cub, and then we'll talk about the actual contract situation.
Yeah, no, I'll place for him to go. I think. I think if he was to go, if there was other options as far as a non-roster invitee, you'd think he'd want to stay out west. That's where his family are, and that's kind of where I figured that would lead him. But yeah, the free agency sort of situation as it's gone through the winter, guys are taking less and less money, or less guaranteed money. And Coop, I love Coop, and that I've probably spoke about him more than any other player in my time on this podcast. But when you look at the raw numbers, you're looking at a guy that floats between half a WAR and 1 WAR each season. And it is a case of like these guys on that bubble of guys that are like that are not seeing guaranteed money at this point. Definitely not long term either. So I figured Coop would get something similar to what Tim Anderson got at the beginning of the winter, sort of 1 year, $5 million.
Yeah.
And then as the winter went, I thought it'd be lower and lower. We're seeing guys now. So Ahmad Rosario was 1.5 for 1 year, and that's where I figured Coop would end up. You're right. I think that minor league option, if they do put him into the major league roster, which you'd hope so and you'd expect so, I think it might be slightly above minimum. That tends to be how that works. So yeah, for me, I'm just glad to see him signed on a personal level. See him get at bat, see him get ready for the season and have a good season. I'm going to root for him throughout his career, whatever jersey he puts on. So yeah, seeing him signed is a positive. The fact that I personally think he'd be a perfect fit for the Marlins right now, especially at that cost point as well. It's crazy to me that the Marlins have this one more spot, I think, in the lineup, that DH spot that you move the guys around. There's one more bat that this team could bring in, and it would improve them. If the Marlins end the season, I think they're going to be there or thereabouts, 500 playoff spot, somewhere like that. Yeah. If they get there and miss by a game or two, having not signed a guy at this point, I'll be disappointed.
Let's segue into the guys that are there. There's probably more meat on the bone here with Cooper, and there's more meat on the free agency bone that we'll get into, I think, maybe in the next week or so. But I wanted to kind of segue this to the guys that are here because, the Marlins have already signed Trey Mancini. And so maybe I do wonder here where Mancini and this deal happened, and it happened quite a few weeks ago, to be honest with you, because we hit an emergency pod for a minor league deal, which kind of sums up the offseason to that point. But, Mancini onto that deal, perhaps, that's kind of then blocked maybe the opportunity in some ways that Garrett Cooper presented. Equally, we've got this kind of Troy Johnston situation that's he's done everything he can possibly do at the minor league level. He was made available in the Rule 5 draft. Like the Marlins decided not to protect him, which again was another really an interesting situation. Wasn't selected. He now rolls into spring, and like Troy, all of a sudden, has a 3-for-3 day. He's putting his best foot forward. So, Trey Mancini, on the other hand, boy, oh boy, 0-for-4 with 4 Ks. I mean, disgraceful start there from Trey Mancini. So, to your point, like, you drop Cooper in that mix, like, who are you taking? Who would you prefer on your roster? Trey Mancini, Garrett Cooper, or Troy Johnson? A lot of people listening to this pod, and I know because they're on Twitter and they answer, I'd like to see Troy Johnson get a go. Give the kid a go. And I understand that. But equally for me, Garrett Cooper at this point is proven. And I know he can be a positive producer. And so I'm with you, though, Sean, at this point. Like, it feels like a real missed opportunity for the Marlins. Like, maybe this Trey Mancini situation has blocked it, but, you can just move on from Mancini pretty quickly. There's no reason they couldn't. So do you think it comes down to that, like, they prefer Mancini over Cooper at this point and see him making the roster?
I think they've kind of put themselves in a situation where they've gone with Mancini and they want to see what they get from that. And it's so early. I'm not gonna attack Mancini for his 0-for-4 4K start.
No,
it might take him a bit of time. We know that he's got that form of pedigree, and obviously with his health issues, and who couldn't root for him.
Absolutely.
As far as Troy Johnston goes, yeah, you're right. It is a case of, I can understand why a lot of people want to see that happen. He's got the power. I mean, he hit 300, 400, 500 last year at AAA, and did basically that at AA as well. So combined across the season, it is a case of what more can he do?
Yeah.
But unfortunately for him, he lacks that pedigree. He's going to be 27 to begin the season. Never had a major league at bat. And he was drafted late into the draft, so it is a case of he's had to work for every opportunity he's got. So maybe a good spring, and as you said, he started off with 3 hits in that game. I think it was, having come off. He didn't even start that game. He came off the bench for that. So a hot spring for Johnston might actually assuage my concerns. But again, that needs to carry on into the season as well. But he probably has, in my eye, the leg up on Mancini to begin, not just with what they've done in spring, because 3 games really doesn't matter, but also just what he did last year in the minor leagues. And obviously Mancini is a wild card. It's a no risk acquisition that if he doesn't hit in spring and he doesn't show enough, then the Marlins haven't lost anything by letting him go.
Yeah, for sure. One to closely monitor, let's say, like that first base role is definitely one of the most obvious like job decisions that is out there, and I'm interested to see how it goes. Run out of time. Just wanted to briefly mention a couple of like pretty high profile bullpen blowups. Josh Simpson and the dude. I mean, I assume it's pronounced like Fauché, but you could easily try to drop the A from that and just like use a different pronunciation that I won't use. But meet the, end it like that. Anyway, those two guys that are pretty much in line, like they're talking Josh Simpson up like pretty sizably at this point with them, moving puck potentially, into the rotation. They were happy to move Kurt. Like all of a sudden, this opportunity is created for Simpson. He then has his like first spring appearance meltdown. Fauché comes in, equally has a huge meltdown as well. Like these are two dudes that I think are like really fighting for the bullpen. It was pretty discouraging to see both of them get absolutely torched in their first outing as well. So I know it's only one game and one appearance, but these types of appearances can have a quite sizable impact in spring for these relievers that you need to rely on immediately. And the bullpen, like we saw last year, is so important to this club. So, not the best start for those guys, but there's another day. Every day's another day, I guess, in the bullpen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The bullpens can be quite sort of volatile. I think it is a case of you have to look at it now with Fauché in particular, the numbers now. He's not going to save those numbers. His numbers at the end of spring aren't going to look good because that start is so poor. So you kind of just need to say to him, look, it's your first start, your first appearance. Let's just ignore that. Let's look at you number-wise going forwards and see what you put together. If you put together a sub-3 ERA and the strikeouts are there and the walks are under control, we can work with that, even though you've got this big number that's sort of like moving all the numbers north. One appearance really doesn't matter. The one thing you could say is they got their work in because they were on the bump for a bit. So, I mean, it's disappointing. Of course, you want to see everyone playing well and have lots of confidence in them, but that's just not the way it works. For me, the bigger concern is that because it's at the beginning of spring. Normally, pitchers are ahead of hitters. I mean, we sort of a 1-1 tie with 3 singles from the Marlins, although that sounds pretty Marlins-like anyway.
It does.
But
it sounds like mid-season form.
Yeah, normally in the early spring, pitchers are ahead of the hitters, and you get these kind of games. So to see a 9-8 game, was it, to begin with, was quite a surprise.
1-run win.
And then, absolutely. And then to give up 6 runs to the Nationals, who, A, aren't going to be a very good team this year, and B, obviously that wasn't their full lineup. So, the excessive runs at the moment is a bit of a concern. But, the back-end bullpen guys, I'm happy to see it there rather than we've seen some high-level pitching, starting pitchers across the league get blown up. At the moment, the Marlins have avoided that. So that's the positive I would look at.
One final one, then we'll get out of here. Talk about Braxton Garrett. He's going to need a few more bullpens before he makes his spring debut. Not sure how that impacts his opening day status. Probably does, to be honest with you. Dig into that more in the next couple of days. Sixto Sanchez. When do we see him starting in spring? Do we see him starting in spring? We're going to see AJ Puk starting, actually, I believe tomorrow or today, if you're listening actually on Tuesday, but we're recording this on a Monday evening. Puk's lined up to start, so he is going to get the start. But Sixto Sanchez, are we actually going to see him start a game, do we think, in spring for the Marlins here?
I'd be interested to see. I mean, ultimately, I guess we'd see an appearance first because they're probably only expecting to get 1 inning out of him to begin with. The last thing you want to do is throw Sixto out for a start, have him labour through the first, and then suddenly you've got a guy that's scheduled to be in the second inning having to come in, or you've got to get a fireman to come in and actually end that first inning. So I think they wouldn't trust him with a start to begin with. I know we've seen some reports, if I can call it that, of him hitting high 90s. I'll wait till I see that before I start believing that one. But
maybe KPH. I'm not sure about MPH, but KPH maybe. I mean, there's no way he's hitting high 90s miles per hour. No way.
Yeah,
from what I've seen.
It's a case of this is a story that's never going to go away until
it isn't.
Hopefully the end of spring, when ultimately they give up on him and we regain that 40-man spot.
Yeah. I feel like with Sixto now, you just need an element of come out, throw in spring, and see what happens. And if it's a blow up, and you just look at it and you just go, nah. And then the next day you just get the news Sixto Sanchez has been DFA'd. And we all just have that closure. I feel like it needs that, where you have a clunker in spring against the Nats 7th string, and you go, yeah, that tells us all we need to know. It's time to move on. And we just, get it done. And we can stop talking about Sixto. With that being said, let's stop talking about Sixto. Sean, appreciate you hopping on a Tuesday, particularly under difficult circumstances in some ways. That Garrett Cooper is no longer a Marlin and is certainly a Cub for now. Guys, thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen. Going to be back tomorrow, of course, because listen, it's a daily pod, and we have got more baseball to talk about. Going to be digging into, I would say, the reaction to AJ Puk as a starter. First time starting a game for the Marlins. So we're going to look to see what that looks like. Equally, what are we seeing from the offense? When are we going to see Tim Anderson out there? That must be incoming as well. So hopefully we get to see our first look of Tim Anderson wearing the number 7 after Jesus Sanchez gives up the number. For what price? We don't know. We'll dig into that too. See you soon, guys.